if he were to get traded to Phoenix, what is sort of the cleanest way that could look? Because Miami's in a position where they don't want to take back salary beyond 2026. Okay. And Bradley Beal ultimately has the power, doesn't want to waive his no trade clause. We'll ultimately see if they get him to cave. But Miami doesn't want him because that's obviously heavy salary beyond the due date, so to speak. So what would a trade like what's the cleanest way it can go down in your estimation? Just looking at the cap, looking at the books, and just sort of figuring out the moving parts of it all. And how many teams would it take?
Probably at least 5 teams.
At least
And
five.
yeah, and Pistons probably need to get involved because they have cap space, and then beyond that, they have a lot of flexibility. They could increase their payroll easily, even once they get capped out. But I
Jesus.
think just the biggest thing is where does Bradley Beal want to what is okay with him?
Hmm.
Because yesterday in the morning, Brian Windhorst was reporting how the Bulls and Suns were talking, and then later it was reported that no, he won't go to the Bulls. So seem and all the Suns insiders they're all like unanimously like, yeah, I don't think Jimmy Butler's coming here. So we'll see. I saw Windhorst said something last night about how now the Heat are willing to trade him on a discount, which I don't know what that means, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think if ultimately the Pistons do get involved, and if you're saying it's at least five teams, so we have Phoenix, we have Miami, we have Detroit. What do the other two teams look like? Are there teams that we've heard about already, rumored to want to get involved, like a Milwaukee, a Chicago? Like what? How do we piece this together?
Like if Beal was okay to going to Chicago, then you can also send Levine to the Bucks. That's been a pretty popular framework. Jimmy to the Suns, and then the Pistons take on money. The Heat get some decent players like Middleton, Portis. Maybe they get under the tax, and then just would the Suns send those 3 picks out? I was thinking maybe the Bucks do the same type of trade that the Suns did with the Jazz, maybe with the Nets trade their 2031, get 3 firsts back, and then that makes it easier for them to get a Levine type. But
Mm.
if the Suns aren't like if there's no way the Suns can get a deal done, then we're gonna have to just go back to the drawing board. That's what it seems like. It seems like after a week of momentum because they did that trade with the Jazz, now it seems like maybe that's not the case anymore. Maybe there's going to be some surprise trade we didn't see coming.
Is there potentially okay? So if this is five teams in order to get Jimmy Butler to Phoenix, what do we think it looks like if he says, "Okay, fine, I'll consider Milwaukee," and then there's a route to? I don't think Miami Milwaukee would be a 1v1 either. I think at least another team gets involved. But the framework of that would be what? Because I was thinking maybe it's Middleton, Portis, something like that, heading to Miami. Jimmy Butler goes to Milwaukee, but then there has to be some other sort of fillers in between, be it a Detroit, maybe a Charlotte, Washington, something along those lines. Could you outline what that alternative could potentially look like?
So if it's just the Bucks, it would just need to be for on their end. They need to do a 4-for-1. They would need to send
Mm,
out Middleton, Portis, Connaughton, and then a guy like Marjan Beauchamp because that lets them satisfy the trade rules. Also, and then also lets them stay below the second apron. Right now they're above the second, but since they'd be aggregating salaries, they just got to be able to stay below the second apron because that would hard cap them to the second apron. So doing that does it. So they're able to keep Butler, get Butler, stay under the second apron, and also fill out their 14th roster spot while staying below the second apron. So that's for the Bucks. It's pretty simple. For the Heat and I think you can just get the Pistons involved if you can just have them take some combination of um, some guys from the Heat and maybe Connaughton that could work. Maybe a fourth team has to get involved, but without Beal's inclusion, it could be a little smaller, maybe 3 or 4 teams tops.
is there a way, or do you think there could be a team ballsy enough if they get the right compensation back? Could Miami find a team to trade Jimmy Butler to that could then just be like, all right, we'll just waive him? Like, is that a mechanic that that's another team would find viable for them, or is that just
If
like a little too out of left field?
well, if they're hoping to get off some long-term money and they just view Jimmy as an expiring, maybe, but he also does have that player option, so he's not really an expiring. Um, I think if you're trading for Jimmy Butler, you basically need to have him be on board based on how how he's shown the ability to be disengaged and whenever he's not happy, because that's the main thing. Now, you can trade for a player who's under contract, but like with a star player, if he's not if he's not all in on the team, if he's not okay with the situation, then that could affect his performance
Mhm.
and that could affect the team. And a team can't go to court and say, "Hey, here's the play right here where he wasn't trying." Was like what as the Heat they accused Jimmy of in the game last month, which I'm sure they could make a compelling case, but there's just
Sure.
nothing in the CBA that allows you to do that. So if you're trading for Jimmy, I think you gotta hope he's gotta be on board with it. With any star player really, for that matter, especially one that he he's his contract situation is really fluid right now. So, but I think he's mainly just looking for a place where he can get his next, maximize his earnings, which is pretty understandable. Um, there were some reports that he doesn't want to go to Memphis. The only reason I could imagine that would be is if they made it clear, hey, here's how much we want to give you. It's not max money.
Right.
Um,
That's what I think.
that's all I could imagine. Yeah, that would probably be the only reason. Otherwise, like, why wouldn't you want to play in
Right.
Memphis?
Right. I think Memphis is like the perfect place, but I get the sense they don't want to extend him. Also, they have to extend Jaren Jackson Jr. this summer. So I think that's a factor in that as well.
Well, I'm just curious what I'm sure they communicated to him what it is they'd resign him to. I'm just wondering, like, what is that where he like where they happen to be singled out from all the places he would supposedly be not okay with going to. Um, so yeah, you like so I don't think, like I said, they got to trade him to. He's got to be okay with the destination for the most part.
Donut Dan, Shanghai Sharks. No, I don't think they're going to do that. But I mean, have you seen the Chinese basketball league teams? I don't think they could afford the salary cap that Jimmy Butler would have. They got some bread though. I mean, they gave Kyle Fogg a couple million not that long ago. Look that name up. Ryan says they wouldn't waive him, but I do think someone will sit on him and flip him for a pick or two in the offseason when he opts in. I just don't see a contender trusting him at this point. What do you think of this scenario, Yossi, where like somebody, I don't know who this would be, but like someone just trades for him and then when he opts in just try to trade him again. I don't know if a team would stomach that necessarily, but I mean, is this a scenario you see as being possible?
As long as they don't lose value, if it's the type of situation where, okay, maybe you are a team like Memphis, you're okay with just renting him for this season and then things don't work out, he opts in, you can at least get that value back or hopefully at least made a deep playoff run. Okay, but it just seems like too many steps to deal with.
Okay, a couple more things and then I'll let you get out of here. One, speaking of the Heat, a lot of the talk has been 2026 free agency, and they want to preserve their cap space for that. Not from the standpoint of, hey, this is going to be like 2010 all over again, but 2026 free agency, is this a myth or is this a real thing? Like, could you see, given how the CBA is affecting teams and how caps are going, could you see like more Paul George situations where a team just lets a guy walk and then we actually do get good free agents that year? Or is this a myth where like, hey, most of these guys are going to sign extensions and there's not going to be that many players available, or somewhere in the middle?
I think you just answered it because that's been the trend ever since COVID. Every star player has been trying to get an extension because that year the salary cap froze. It stayed the same. So you're gonna, for the first time in a while, players were gonna make as much money extending to their max as hitting free agency and getting a max. So and that it just hasn't changed since that. And now the new extension rules, you can get higher extensions, so now it makes it easier to maximize your money in an extension than in the last CBA. So, and especially now that they opened up the trade rules for below apron teams, it seems like the new free agency, so to speak, is teams extending, and if they need to get moved, now it's much easier to trade these guys. Um, so yeah, I see some of the names that could potentially become free agents in 2026, but chances are most of those good names will sign extensions. I don't know. I would. I think eventually someday that pendulum will swing where we will get players trying to hit free agency again. I just I'm not sure it's going to be in 2026.